You know that feeling, right? Where you can only really focus when the pressure is on, when the deadline is breathing down your neck? Well, today we're going to dig into the neuroscience of that exact feeling, why your brain seems to be wired for urgency, and what it actually means about you. I mean, it's a story we all know. You've got a whole week, and you spend it just staring at a blank screen, feeling totally stuck. And then, boom, it's 2 a.m., the deadline is just hours away, and you suddenly turn into this productivity genius. So, what is going on? Why does our brain wait for that emergency light to start flashing before it finally decides to get in gear? And look, right off the bat, let's get one thing crystal clear. This is not because you're lazy. It's not because you're a procrastinator at heart. What you're experiencing is a very specific and surprisingly common neural pattern. It's a feature of your brain's wiring, not some kind of flaw in your character. And this brings us to what we can call the deadline paradox. It's this weird shared experience of needing these super intense, high-pressure windows just to focus and get stuff done. Let's actually break down what that looks like. So on a normal day, your brain can feel like it's just wading through mud. You feel stuck, you're staring at that blank screen, you've got zero bandwidth. But on a deadline, it's like a switch just flips. Your brain slams into high-intensity gear, fueled by adrenaline, and you somehow manage to finish a week's worth of work in a single night. The contrast isn't just big, it's like you're a completely different person. Okay, so how does this actually work on a biological level? Let's get into the nuts and bolts, the neurology behind this whole pattern. Let's look at the how of your brain on urgency. It all starts with this idea called optimal stimulation. Think of your nervous system kind of like a phone battery. For most people, you can plug it into any old charger and it'll slowly, steadily power up. But for some of us, our system needs one of those super fast, high-powered chargers just to get going. That slow and steady approach, it just doesn't provide enough juice to even start. And this leads to something called executive function burnout. So imagine your brain has a thinner neural filter, meaning it's just constantly processing way more information than the average person. This has a really high metabolic cost. It just drains your mental battery. Pretty soon, even simple tasks feel huge and overwhelming, and you literally can't start anything until that rush of adrenaline from a deadline forces your brain to pour all its remaining energy into that one single thing. Now, over time, this whole cycle creates what scientists call a high allostatic load. The best way to think about this is like revving a car engine in neutral for months on end. It's the cumulative wear and tear on your body and your mind from being in this constant state of high alert, always preparing for a threat that never actually shows up. And that is what a high allostatic load feels like. You're just stuck in the loading screen of your own life. So when that deadline finally hits, the external threat at last matches the internal intensity your body has been holding on to all this time. And in that weird moment of alignment, you can finally exhale and focus. So we've covered the how, but that kind of begs a deeper question, doesn't it? The why. I mean, where does this neural wiring even come from? Well, the roots often go all the way back to our earliest experiences. A lot of the time, it begins with what the psychologist John Bowlby called our internal working models. These are basically the mental maps we build in childhood to understand how the world works and how relationships work. And what's so crucial here is that this means the pattern we're talking about is a learned survival mechanism, not some kind of built-in character flaw. So here's how that chain reaction often plays out. Maybe you grew up as a latchkey kid, or everyone always told you that you are so mature for your age. You learned to be self-sufficient, for sure, but you might have also learned that your needs only got met when a situation became urgent or serious. So as an adult, that neural fingerprint is still there. Your brain now literally equates urgency with importance. It's the signal that something is finally worth your full effort. Okay, now let's connect this internal wiring to the external world we all live in today. Because this personal history of yours doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It interacts with the insane pressures of modern life, especially for what people have called the burnout generation. I mean, our culture often trains us to tie our self-worth to what other people think. We're told we're special, but we feel worthless unless we're performing at 110%. Rest feels like you're falling behind. And all of this creates this deep, nagging fear of just trying at a normal, steady pace. That kind of effort feels like this vulnerable audition for approval that we are terrified of failing. But the last-minute heroic scramble, that's a genius way to bypass the fear. If you succeed, you're a hero. If you fail, well, you can just blame the clock.
So let's bring all these different threads together for the final and I think most important takeaway here. It's time to reframe this entire experience.
Let's just say it one more time because it really, really matters. This pattern is not a flaw in your character. It is a beautifully, and sometimes painfully, human adaptation to a world that can often feel overwhelming and unpredictable. It's just your brain doing what it learned to do to keep you safe. And this is the ultimate reframe. We can literally swap out those old self-critical labels. Procrastination becomes a form of nervous system regulation. What we called laziness is actually a protective strategy, and what felt like a deep personal failure is really a sophisticated way of managing your most precious resource, your own mental space.
So I'll just leave you with this final thought. What if this thing you've always seen as your greatest flaw, this tendency to wait for the emergency, what if it's actually your oldest, most loyal form of protection? It's something to think about.